This podcast is sponsored by CSMI, the maker of the HUMAC Norm isokinetics system. Purchase a new or refurbished machine, or you can even upgrade an existing system to bring it up to date with all the latest testing and training applications. Please visit csmisolutions.com to view all of their available products, including the HUMAC Norm isokinetic system, the HUMAC Balance portable computerized balance system, and Sportswear Online. CSMI. Better data leads to better results.
Hello, and welcome to the Everything PT podcast with Matt Taylor and Daniel Bodkin. Please do not consider anything you hear to be medical advice. Just a couple of guys ranting about everything PT. Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 7 of the Everything PT podcast. This episode, we're talking PT life and problems with special guests today too. But before we introduce our guest, Daniel, how you doing?
Doing well. It's rainy here in Atlanta, but it's not cold, so not bad. I'm going to go international next week. A little bit of R&R. Nothing tied to isokinetics this time. So just a little bit of time with the wife.
It's exciting. We got a Utah trip planned too, so I'm excited for that later.
Well, speaking of excited, I'm excited for our guest tonight.
Oh man, I'm super excited too. And our guest is Erik Meira too, from all the way from out in Portland. So Erik, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me out. I really appreciate the opportunity. Well, not necessarily having me out, but having me on, I guess, would be the more specific thing. You didn't fly me anywhere.
No, I could not afford to fly you anywhere too. So
well, we really appreciate you coming on. And just full disclosure, a few years ago I did a free webinar series, and it was through CSMI for isokinetics, and we advertised on your podcast, PT Inquest. And that's ultimately how Matt, listening to your podcast, ended up getting his isokinetic system that I installed. So the circle is now complete.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Oh, it's been great. And Erik, I was reading your curriculum vitae, which is your cell phone numbers on the internet. So you might want to look into it.
There it is.
Well, funny story. My mother-in-law, when I put my CV on my website, my mother-in-law, who's an OT, sent me a message about 2 days later. She's like, you have your social security number on there. I was like,
I don't
crap, man. So I think you're safe.
I'm trying to get my cell phone number off the internet, so I thought I'd do you a favor. But I looked through, and Erik, you do so much, heavily involved with the APTA. Obviously, you were a clinic owner. I think you might have sold your clinic in the recent past. Is that right?
Yeah, about 6 months before the pandemic hit. So I saw it coming, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to get out of this.
So I started a clinic 2 months before, in January 2020. So you made out like a banshee, my friend.
Yeah, I absolutely did. Yeah, it was one of those, and I wasn't thrilled about the sale. Like, I didn't feel like I got any real good value out of the sale. Sure. I essentially just sold the assets because I wasn't running an extremely productive business. I'll put it that way. I was running a clinic that was paying for my salary and my staff's salary, but it wasn't making a quote unquote profit. And so I ended up basically just selling the equipment, and I was kind of grumbling about it, whatever. And then the pandemic hit. I said, you know what? I think I'm good.
Great foresight, because I tell you what, it has been challenging. We do the traditional payment model fee, the fee schedule, and it's brutal, man. We just got a cut. I don't know if you're aware of that from Medicare. You're probably aware.
Oh, really? No.
Yeah.
Not anymore. I'm not aware of those things.
Do you guys do cash-based pay out there, or
no? So I'm purely a consultant right now. So it's
okay.
Much, I get paid directly by whoever I'm going to work for, and awesome. There is no reimbursement hardly ever from insurances for what I do.
I just meant like in your previous model for your clinic.
Oh yeah, for sure. We were an insurance based, the traditional, getting paid by insurance, having contracts, taking co-pays, co-insurance, that kind of stuff, and having to work within that system as best we could. Yeah.
Cool, man.
Well, Eric, I have a question. Being involved as the consultant, running a very successful podcast, you have weekend courses, you're involved with your family. Like, how the hell do you do it? And you're involved in the APTA.
Oh, yeah.
How do you balance everything?
Well, it's one of those things that I guess I have a little bit of a short attention span. So it's not something I can't just like do one thing all day, every day. So I've always been that way where I always have a couple things going on at the same time. So that's what's really kind of driven me as far as that's concerned. And so it's one of those that as I've, been doing this over 20 years now, where I kind of look at myself and I'm learning about myself, about carving out time to not do things. Cause I have a tendency to go like really hard and fast at things and then like a crazy work ethic. So like in 4 hours, I'll accomplish what most people will do in 8 hours, but I'll sit there and go, but I've got 4 more hours to fill, and then I'll fill it. And then by the end of an 8-hour day, I just want to collapse in a heap. And I find myself not really taking care of myself. So that's been something I've been working on last year or so, is really trying to pull back as much as I can, but and really focus on doing the things I enjoy doing. This is actually something that I don't remember where I got this from, but I've started doing it. Is every year, and I tend to do it around my birthday, I list out the things I enjoy doing professionally, and I list out the things I enjoy doing, personally. And then what I do is I then rank them in order of like the most to not necessarily like the least, because I like everything. But then the top 5 things I circle, and then I get rid of everything else. Because I have a tendency of, wanting to do, more and more and more. And what ends up happening, you just spread yourself too thin. So that's really helped me kind of consolidate a little bit to focus on the things that I really enjoy doing, and not, spread myself too thin, as I said before.
So PT Inquest, that's how I learned about this. That's how a lot of people know you from. You have a skill on there, you and your co-host, JW Matheson, that I don't know how you do it. And that's, you're able to break down the research in the articles to a level that I can't even comprehend. And I always tell, people, I'm a meathead from the Army who got a degree. So when I pick up a study, what do I actually need to look for to know, is this something I should actually look at and pay attention to, or something I should toss in the file?
Yeah, it's one of those things that what I find what most people do wrong is that they try to kind of get into the statistics a little too far. They try to get into like a lot of the details around how things are set up from from a statistical perspective. Statistics are great and they're extremely important. But the problem is that what I then find is that people don't have basic science literacy. And so what ends up happening is that they're kind of missing the point entirely of what's going on. And so a great example of this is what's known as tooth fairy science. It's also Richard Feynman called it cargo cult science, if you're familiar with cargo cults. But with tooth fairy science, the simple thing is that if your base assumption is that the tooth fairy is real, you can then design a study that checks all the boxes for a high quality study, but your basic premise is flawed. And so if you're actually assessing, like whether left-handed kids get more money than right-handed kids from the tooth fairy, whether kids who live on the second floor get more money than kids who live on the first floor, things like that, you may find some statistically significant differences, and then attribute it to the tooth fairy. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, the tooth fairy is not real. So what exactly are you even doing here? And this is where a lot of times when I look at a study, as I'm reading the study, I'm like, why did they even do this in the first place? I don't even care what it finds. The plausibility here is not based in anything yet. And so the simple things to do, and this is usually what I recommend for people when they look at a study, is, put all the other stuff aside, just assume everything is done well. The reality is it probably isn't, but just assume it is done well. Look at the background statement, look at just in the abstract, look at what they found, look at what their conclusions are. And then just take a step back and ask yourself, how else could I explain these findings? So this idea of generating alternative hypotheses. And so when you look at a paper, just look through it and then just take big honest step back and just go, how else could I explain these? Could what I be seeing be the placebo? Could the causal arrow be going the other way? In other words, the thing that was the outcome, maybe that was actually the cause, looking at it from that perspective. And so a lot of times what you'll find is pretty quickly, the study didn't really clean anything up. It just found an effect. But actually putting any sort of causation to it is really, really challenging from that perspective. And I think that keeps the average clinician more honest, because that's the difficult thing is you see, oh, but I have this study that shows this thing works. It's like, well, you have a study that shows there was a correlation here, but to then apply that to your population is extremely challenging. So just take it all with a grain of salt.
Yeah. So Daniel, or Erik, that sounds really familiar, just having taken your hip and your knee course too, and Daniel, I encourage you to take Erik's course when you do for continuing ed.
Yeah, I just renewed in December, so
okay.
I got some credits I need to pick up.
Yeah, so Erik, if I misspeak, tell me, but it sounded like you pretty much reiterated pretty much what you. So before you take the actual nitty gritty hip and knee, you go through really a basic science overview,
That's right.
The scientific method, just review basically how good science is and where we are, kind of thing. Is that accurate, Erik?
Yeah, I still do that. That's a quick 2 hours. I can do it in less time for sure. And actually, I'm probably going to release my old version of that publicly for free at some point in the near future here, as that old online version of it is kind of sundowning. I just released a new one in March, a new version of that hip and knee course. But I have another Foundations of Practice course that I do online that is little 20-minute bits. And it's like 20 minutes about one specific bit of evidence-based practice, about scientific method. There's like how do you review an article in a little 20-minute video. Yeah. There's one that also talks about like what do we mean by a strong versus a weak hypothesis? So like calling your shot. Why does it matter to actually anticipate an effect size before you test for that effect size? Things like that, where it breaks it down in these little 20-minute bits. And then there's other stuff there in that Foundations course as well of psychosocial, biopsychosocial, patient-centered, Socratic therapy, using a Socratic method kind of model, the Rogerian psychotherapy models for interacting with patients, and getting into, basic biomechanics and that kind of stuff as well. So that's a little more, quote unquote, foundational. The hip and knee one, which is the one that you've done, starts with, a bit of that, and then gets into, all right, let's just start applying this to working with hips and knees.
Gotcha. So Erik, just reading about you, I know that you've participated in some research and done some research. Are you currently doing any stuff right now that you're allowed to tell us about, or?
Yeah, I'm involved in a couple different groups that are looking at like handheld dynamometry. Can we be better with it? You mentioned before about like isokinetic machines, electromechanical dynamometers. A lot of the research that we see published on, like for example, ACL return to play and that kind of thing, weirdly, they use an isokinetic machine as an isometric dynamometer, which is, they are amazing at that. And that's what the research has been showing, is that they are the gold standard and nothing stands up to it. What we're trying to do is, because, if you just understand basic physics, you should be able to recreate that setup with just a basic like crane scale type setup. It's very plausible for that. And so I'm involved with a couple different groups who are trying to look at that and figure out how do we solve that problem, so that, the simplest test of an isometric hold should be something that's a little more approachable for a day-to-day clinician to be able to do, again, day-to-day, without having a machine like that. And whereas, you both have access to that kind of thing, you can be a center for people to get the occasional test on something like that. But then for day-to-day management, how you doing today? How you doing this week? There should be something cheaper that can be used for that. So involved with that kind of stuff. And then there's a couple of researchers looking at some of the like return to play drills that I use, like 505 for return to play after ACL, that just looking at ways to start looking for correlations, before we can even get into validation as a return to play type metric, some of those types of studies. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Eric, when I do a lot of education with isokinetics, and we have some good metrics that are researched on, body weight, how strong should certain muscles be compared to your body weight. But all the studies that I reference, they seem to be a little bit old. And the reason for that is a lot of the newer studies, they're getting reported as Newton meters per kilogram versus foot pounds over pounds. And it's in the one time that I like the US system of units is that, because we know that the quadriceps, it should be a 1-to-1 ratio, 1 foot-pound of torque for every pound of body weight. But when it comes to Newton meters per kilogram, it's what, a 3-to-1 ratio?
Correct.
It's a little bit harder to correlate that. And I see it in tons of studies out there. There's actually just one in ISJPT, this current issue. And I scroll down because I'm loving what I'm seeing. It's, broken down by graphs. There's meniscal involvement. And of course, they published it as Newton meters per kilogram.
Yeah.
So I die a little inside every time I see that.
Yeah, and I've actually talked about that in that foundations course. I talk about how I prefer to communicate in foot pounds to pounds to the patient, because it makes more sense, because it really is, you need to take your body weight worth of load on your quadricep, for example. And it's a little more complicated than that, of course, as to how that actually, breaks down, because it is a torque versus a weight. But, in research, you're typically going to always use those standard units in order to publish. And so you just have to have that little simple, if you're looking at Newton meters per kilogram, just know that divide whatever that number is by 3, and that'll give you your foot pounds per pound. Because that's another thing, is my understanding too, is like adductor strength, for example, should be around 3 Newton meters per kilogram. So again, a 1-to-1 ratio for that. But understanding that, and understanding, how torque is calculated, you can reverse engineer some little tests in the clinic where you basically put, 1 foot of moment arm and have a full body weight worth of ground reaction force. And you pretty much have I just put a body weight worth of torque onto this person's quad, without having to get a fancy device out necessarily to measure it. So understanding that, and again, as you note, that's so much easier math to do in the imperial units than it is to try to then figure out, that equation for standard units.
Hey, all you rehab specialists out there. Do you have an isokinetic dynamometer just sitting around your clinic not being used? Little known fact, isokinetic machines that aren't used regularly are at higher risk for bouts of sadness. Help your machine out and take CSMI's newest CEU course, Isokinetics 101 online, created by me, Daniel Bodkin, and learn how to use all the exercise and testing applications available on your machine. With new and exciting rehab techniques in your toolbox, your sad isokinetic machine can become an active member of the rehab team again and regain its happiness. Isokinetics 101 online by CSMI has been approved for 8 credit hours for athletic trainers, physical therapists, and physical therapy assistants. Contact your state board for details on specific requirements. This course is available at humacnorm.com/courses/isokinetics-101. Looking for a way to improve sport-specific training with your athletes? Then you have to check out BlazePods. BlazePods is a neurocognitive reaction training intervention that can be incorporated into your sessions for patients throughout the treatment spectrum. Visit blazepod.com, enter code EVERYTHINGPT at checkout, and save 15% off your order today.
Yeah, in the world of the busy clinician, it's just challenging to you got to see 2 patients at a time almost now, and so I think you're right, Daniel, to try to trim the fat and just a quick conversion be very helpful, I think, clinically. So, and while we're talking about isokinetics, so having those machines, like, we are very, very unique in a sense that, like, I have the opportunity to have one in our clinic, and they're very expensive. We know the value of them. Eric, do you see a big place for isokinetics in the future and objective testing with return to play and stuff, or is it just too expensive for a lot of folks?
Yeah. So, I mean, the unfortunate thing that it comes into, that you come across here is pretty much every situation that we're in is a business. So the question is going to be, what's the return on investment for that? And so as a clinic owner who what they care about is profit loss, what they're going to look at is, my clinic is busy. I don't have enough room for more patients right now. Me adding an isokinetic machine is not going to bring in a single dollar more of income to me. And so that's looking at it purely from the income side. We deal with this. I work a lot with professional teams, and they'll see this as well, where they're like, we could invest in that, but we could also just trade the athlete. And then we bring in a different athlete. And you'll see this with the college level too, is we'll just recruit another athlete. We don't need to make that kind of investment. Now that hurts my heart a little bit, because my whole passion is doing what's best for the athlete, and doing what's best for the athlete may have no effect on your dollar. And people say, well, a high performing athlete is going to bring. It's like, yeah, but how much can you really guarantee that you're going to really drive more t-shirt sales, for example, or sell more tickets, the way that these teams actually get more money. And so it really has to be a matter of, quote unquote, doing what's right. And so that's where, caring about those numbers is the number one step. And that's really the hardest thing, especially with isokinetics, because people will practice for a while and they're like, I think I've got a pretty good handle on what I'm doing. And I've had these cases where we'll have, an athlete's worth $100 million who's coming off an ACL tear, and they, for whatever reason, somebody has decided, we really do want to get an isokinetic test on them, and they'll consult with me, and I'll lay out what should be tested. A lot of times it's kind of reprogramming things a little bit, because a lot of the standard tests in there, some of the stuff I look at is missing. So they'll set all that up, and they're doing it almost like as an afterthought, like, let's just check this box. And then after they do the test, I immediately get a phone call of like, what the hell's going on? Why did my athlete do so poorly on that test? It's like, well, because they've learned how to function without the thing that test actually tests for. So it's one of those that once you use it with a couple patients, you kind of had that aha moment of, oh, I had no idea. It's like, yeah, that's what these machines are doing, is actually showing you the things that you were not aware were hiding in there. And I don't know if you guys had that similar experience the first couple of times you used one, where you're like, well, let's just see what it shows. You're like, holy crap. That's a huge difference from one side to the other.
Well, absolutely. I'm a big proponent of testing all along the plan of care. So 8 weeks out, I like to do isometric tests on, the quad and the hamstring, unless there's, a meniscal involvement or a hamstring graft. Then I test them every 4 weeks, and not just doing the isometric test early on, I'm just having them load. But eventually I like to do the concentric eccentric test for the quadriceps and the hamstrings. But then I also like to do an isometric test after that, not just where they're slowly pushing into it, but where they're exploding into it. Because now we're not just looking at strength, but we're also looking at rate of force production. And we could talk on this for hours.
For sure. Yeah. And that's what people get mixed up about is, rate of force development and is specifically an isometric measure. You read it off of the force time curve from an isometric test. And so if you want the pure representation of it, that is where you get it from. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's amazing of how, I'll have an athlete that they can hit well over their body weight. They're well over 300 pounds, a very large professional athlete, and they'll hit that, but it'll take them all 5 seconds to get to it. Mm-hmm. And you'll see, if you actually look at the snapshot of, when you look at, kind of quote unquote function for sport, you're looking at, between a quarter and half a second tops, and they won't even be at 50% of what they would of what their actual true peak would be, which would mean that it doesn't matter that they have all that strength, they don't have any access to it. And that's going to demonstrate itself differently as well. But again, that's something you would pick up pretty quickly in a machine like that.
Yeah. Well, not only that, if they're your athlete, you're working with them 2 or 3 times a week. You're taking them through all the progressions on the machines. There's, hundreds of different things you can do on that machine other than just a test. Yeah. So when it comes time for, 6 or 7 months, when it's return to sport, roughly where they are, versus the athlete that's coming in for the one-time test. That's where the big, the jaw hits the floor when they see the difference in their curves. And that's when you tell them just how big of a deficit they truly have.
Yeah. I don't like to do, my feeling is they need to get that first test by 4 months at the latest. That's when I want to see that first one. And even though, I am a proponent of, if the test is not going to change your plan of care, don't do the test. And so I could say at 4 months, I know they still have a problem and I know what I still need to work on. But I think just giving it that baseline. And then I'm also a big fan of, because you'll test somebody serially over, every 4 weeks, and you'll see them just getting a better handle of the test. And all of a sudden what you'll notice is that the uninvolved side starts to perform better on that test. And you may see that what you thought was symmetry starts to split off, that actually you have a false sense of symmetry with a one-off test. And that's why, I really don't like, hey, yeah, they're totally done with rehab. Let's take a look at them at 9 months and see where they are. Even if they pass that, to me, it's like, I just don't know if I can trust those numbers. Even if their torque to body weight ratio looks good, I see plenty of people whose torque to body weight ratio for normal is way higher than what we would consider normal. And so I have a hard time trusting it as a one-off test.
Erik, you mentioned PT as a business, right? So reimbursements are down. Our patients are paying more out of pocket. They're expecting more out of us because they're paying more. And there's also the fix me culture. So they want more out of you as a clinician. How much farther can we go as an industry? Where does the plane crash into the mountain, or can it be pulled up and save the lives of everybody on board?
Yeah, I am a little pessimistic about that right now. The way it is right now, it's not sustainable. The problem we have, we can talk about how much money it costs to become a PT, what the reimbursement is, debt to salary ratio and these types of things. But, the incentives around physical therapy right now is, in order for a physical therapist to make money, they need to essentially get as many visits as they can out of every single referral. And that's not really value-based care. You're basically trying to, get as many numbers as you can. You do it by volume, basically. And the weird thing is, with insurance companies, they used to be, bigger gatekeepers, so to speak, where they would put a stop to it. But now they kind of let things go. They just let you do it by volume. And part of that has to do with the way insurance companies are regulated now in the United States, at least, is that they can only keep 20% of the money that they bring in. The other 80% has to go to patient care. And so that means the only way that they can make more of a profit is to actually spend more. And so we find that there's this big drive to basically turn PT clinics into spas, where you're going to do feel good stuff. You're going to try to make the patient as committed to you as possible, and just kind of turn that over. And so to me, what'll happen is I see everything just kind of ballooning out and then having like a bubble burst, where people, as a society will say, we're spending way too much on healthcare. We need to rein things in. And I think PT will be one of those things that gets, pulled back like that. And, unfortunately, if we don't do it for ourselves, somebody's going to do it for us. And, but that said, the incentives are not there right now for us to do that. You'll go out of business if you try to run that line a little too tight. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I can speak to being a clinic owner and clinician and trying to do what's right for the patient and trying to do what's right for our practice and the body of physical therapists too. But I have been in talks with the APTA with one of their, the vice president, who's like not a liaison, but he's going to bat. Lobbyist is the word.
Yeah.
And he's actually going to come on the show. His name's Justin Elliott. I don't know.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if you've met.
I don't think
Justin.
so.
It's going to be a good episode. We're going to ask Justin prepare him with some hard questions here to answer. Poor guy. But the one that I really want to know is like, what are the talks about a fee schedule? What does it look like? How do we incentivize therapists to do incredibly good work, including objective testing, return to play sport, and get our therapists a raise too? But because we have this $20,000 piece of equipment sitting in here, and we can bill for it $28 for 15 minutes on it. Same as doing ankle pumps.
So I've got a couple of thoughts around that. The first one is because some people have said, well, how do we stop that kind of mill mentality? Because a lot of new grads, they'll come out and that's the first job they get is working in a mill, and they're horrified by it. And the way I say it is, well, legally they're allowed to do that. So one thing would be to change the law to make it illegal to run practices like that. I don't see the political will to make that happen. No. The only other way you can do that is make it unethical to practice like that. And so you can have the APTA change its code of ethics to say that that is unethical. That's something we don't need any lobbying power or anything like that. We can decide it as a group. I don't think we have critical mass within our profession to make that change, but that's where the change would have to come from there. But as far as the fee schedule, what I would love to see changed is evaluation treatment code to be added to what we do. So, for example, when you go in to see your primary care physician, you can go and see them for an evaluation where they're going to check things out, and they're going to, maybe you have, they find that you have high blood pressure or something like that. So they're going to put you on a treatment plan, and then you'll come back in for another visit. Well, for that follow-up visit, they don't have to, quote, treat you. They could just spend the whole visit talking with you. And there is a code for that. In physical therapy, we don't have such a code. Like if I have a chronic pain patient, for example, or somebody with persistent pain, every visit could be just a lot about just chatting about what's going on. And there may not be an actual, quote unquote, physical intervention, but we don't have a code to bill for that. So we have to do something with them. And so that kind of drives that as well. The other thing is to think about like what a surgeon does, the way a surgeon bills for what they do. A surgeon is going to bill for their own time. And it doesn't matter what they do. Their time is their time. Okay. So that again, I would love to see, hey, the time for a physical therapist, that they have a certain amount of value per hour. And that's what they're going to bill for, is how much time did I need to spend with this individual for that? But then the facility would have its own billing code as well. So for example, if you're having surgery, you may get a, quote, upcharge because the surgeon felt that they needed to use this special device for this case, and that they couldn't use the cheaper device, and they would have to justify, this is why I had to use this more expensive device. And so I'd love to see if the physical therapist would say, look, I spent 30 minutes with this individual. So that's two 15-minute units at my build out time, whatever it is, $50 or something like that per unit. But I had to use heavy weights and I had to use an isokinetic machine. Now, can I justify the use of that? That's where our research, I would would need to support that. Yes. And this is where we see these things where you're like, yeah, actually it doesn't matter the intensity of the exercise. You just need to do exercise. Okay. Well, I don't need to invest money in heavy weights. I just need to just do whatever. But you may have a situation like an ACL reconstruction where like, no, there's plenty of evidence that shows that they need a certain amount of strength training, and they need a certain amount of testing with certain tools. And so then I'm incentivized as a clinic owner to spend the money on that, right? Because I'm going to get paid for it. We just talked about that before. What's the return on investment on an isokinetic machine? As you were pointing out, it's not going to give you money back in your pocket because the incentives are not there for it. But I would love to see that there is an actual separation of a facility charge and the professional, the professionals charge, like the person themselves providing the service. Because then again, a high-tech place with motion capture and all these things, they can bill for those things, but they can't put a patient with low back pain, with acute low back pain on it, because they're not going to get reimbursed for it. No. That person needs to just go to the place that has a couple yoga mats, get them moving, and send them on their way with educational materials and that kind of thing. Yeah. That's where our incentives should be lined up. But right now there's no incentives for people, for clinicians and facilities to spend any money.
Yeah, I kind of feel like our field in the APTA, and I'm new to the APTA, full disclosure, but I feel like we're playing a lot of defense and just like fielding, putting out fires instead of saying, like whenever an employee comes to me with a problem, I always say, well, what do you think we should do about it? Like, come to me with a solution. And I think our solution should be A, B, and C. And that's the bet that makes a lot of sense, rather than just saying, please don't cut us because we're good at our jobs.
Right. We're always trying to get more, like the fight, regardless of what people think about like dry needling, for example, that's like a huge political fight for us to be able to dry needle. I'm just like, who cares? Yeah. Get me that code that allows me to be billed for my time, regardless of what I do. We got slapped in the face when the pandemic hit, because all of a sudden it's like telehealth. And what do the insurance companies say? You can't do PT over telehealth. You guys, you've been telling us all these years that you do things to people and that you have to put your hands on them and that you have to be face to face. You can't do telehealth. And then we had to backpedal and go, but we have a lot of value that we can provide with just a conversation. And we're like, well, you've never said that before. And so that's where I think our fights really need to be, is to establish ourselves as true professionals and not just technicians, people who do things to other people. It's not what we are.
It's a great point. And just to jump on dry needling real quick, I put that lobbyist back in a corner and I grilled him on poor guy. I asked him about dry needling and I was like, why are we trying to be evidence-based here? If so, that the science is not great with dry needling. And he said that we really didn't want to do that. And I'll let him speak for himself in a few weeks. But why they protected it was because they wanted to keep the ability to do EMG studies within the field of, and that jargon, was minced in there together within the
that and the ability to eventually do injectables. Like in other countries, a lot of times physios can inject like a steroid injection or something like that. And my counter to that was always, well, then fight for those things. Don't fight for dry needling, fight for the ability to do this over here or do that over there. And the other reason that they fought for it is, well, because the profession wanted them to fight for it. And that's where I keep saying, people are like, well, we should regulate things into the way that we want it. It's like, you can't. The profession has to want it. Why are so many PTs spending money on, not to bash dry needling, but dry needling courses? Why is so many people spending all this money to get certified in dry needling? It's like, well, because they want to, and you could regulate it and say that you can't give CEU for that. You know what that's going to do? Absolutely nothing. The people are still going to go take those courses because they want it. And then they'll do some other like MedBridge or something like that to pick up their actual CEUs. That's just not the tool to, we got to get people to just change the way they think about what they provide.
I agree.
Erik,
Daniel, have any thoughts, Daniel?
I am the guy that would be on the floor because I passed out the moment I put a needle in somebody. So
exactly.
I'm cool. I got thumbs. I got, a hypervolt gun. I got my scraper. Yeah. I'm cool I don't need needles. We're good. Erik, I got one last question for you. Yeah. What advice would you give to a new grad, to somebody in the middle of their career, and then somebody that's got maybe 5 years left and they're about to ride off into the sunset?
Well, for new grad, get your reps in is my big thing. Whenever I teach any like new skill or something, it's like, especially an evaluation skill, it's like kind of test everybody with it. Just to start get your reps in of what does even normal look like, even if it's not really a warranted test, so to speak, as long as it's not invasive or something, but just get your reps in and try to see as many different things as you can. People ask me a lot about like getting into pro sports. When you think about like an NBA team, for example, how many ACL injuries they're going to see in a year on an NBA team? Like it'll be years between an ACL injury on an NBA team. And so if that's all your experience is with ACL injuries, you're not going to have a lot of very good experience. And so when you're coming out new, you want to get in that environment where you're going to see, you're going to see 20 in a year. All right. So get those reps in, and not just 20 of those, but you're going to see 20, Achilles ruptures. You're going to see 20, really just start kind of piling that on as best you can. And then as you start to get those reps in, you'll also start to get a feel for what you're really interested in, because there's things that appear interesting to you, but then when you actually start practicing, you're like, actually, it's kind of boring. I'm not really interested in that as much as I thought it would be. So getting those reps in, I think, is really important as a new grad. As you get towards your middle of your career, it really is a matter of kind of narrowing down what it is that you really are passionate about and try to focus in on that. It's such a vast profession that's to try to be kind of a jack of all trades. It makes it's just very, very difficult. And so my feeling is, in the middle of your career, to really start to zero in and start saying no more, as far as, no, I don't want to work with that population anymore. I really want to focus here. And if I can't get that within the company I'm working for, how can I find it with making a change or something like that for that career? definitely as that, because, this is also your transition from that newer professional into a more seasoned professional towards the end of their career. So you also start thinking about, how am I going to start giving back to my profession and to those people coming up behind me? Something that we need to keep in mind is that mentorship typically is only about 5 or so years out in front of you, meaning that like if you ask students who do they want to get mentored by, they want to get mentored by new grads. They don't want to get mentored by the person who's 20 years out. They want advice from people who who identify with them and who just made that step before them. And so people in the middle of their career are really good to give advice to people who are early in their career. And so already be ready to be giving back through that process. And then as you get to the end, later part of your career, it's really a matter of kind of trying to make an effort to step aside as much as you can, to give other people the opportunity to move up and to be successful the way that they want to be successful. I think too many people, when they get later into their careers, kind of dig in their heels and say, well, I've made it to this mountaintop, so to speak, and now I just want to lock myself in here and not let anybody else up on this mountaintop. And I think it's very important to, throughout your whole career, but definitely as you get towards the end, to continue to look back behind you and go, how can I keep helping people up, and give other people opportunities to get through with that, and take that as a position of honor, so to speak, that you can step aside and help other people be able to be successful, and then for those other people to start helping the next generation as well.
Pretty awesome information there, Eric. Thanks, buddy. One more, I know George Davies you introduced me to George Davies. I was talking to George about you a little bit, and he said that you were a big thinker, amongst other things. We were having a beer together too. But so I got kind of a 30,000 foot view question for you. Where do you think our profession is heading in the next 50 years? And I know that some states are approving imaging, for X-ray, CTs, MRI. There's talks of I don't even know, some pain management, like for like a Medrol dose pack or something like that. So I'm very interested to get your answer to that one.
Well, and, especially as, some of the lines are blurring, as far as like with physicians and everything, because physicians have, physician assistants and nurse practitioners and some of these other things. And so there is that question of, especially in the musculoskeletal world for physical therapy, in that outpatient world in particular, where you guys both, the setting you guys both are involved with, I really see the physical therapist becoming the kind of the primary care physician or the gatekeeper of musculoskeletal injuries. So for example, if I sprain my ankle and I want to go see somebody, I should be able to just go straight to that physical therapist. And if you ask any general practitioner or primary care physician, they would say, yes, I don't want to see that person. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in that complicated diabetic, or I'm interested in somebody with some metabolic disease or disorder or something like that. They're not interested in that, run of the mill sprain or something like that. But the problem that we have is, for us to do that, we have to know when to say no. How many, anybody listening out there as a physical therapist, how many times have you seen a patient and thought physical therapy is not appropriate for this person? And the answer is almost never. I mean, every case that walks in is appropriate for physical therapy. So unless you regulate yourself, you're going to be regulated by others. And so you can't be a gatekeeper if you just keep the gate open nonstop for that. So you have to be able to triage from that perspective. But, the example, if somebody comes in with an ankle sprain, you should be, as a physical therapist, be able to take a look at that and go, oh, this is just a minor ankle sprain. Here's some information. I'm going to actually write you a script for an anti-inflammatory or something, again, whether it's appropriate or not, but you should be able to do that at your discretion. But you should also be able to go, actually, this thing looks, I'm doing my Ottawa ankle rules here on this. This needs a radiograph, and it needs this kind of radiograph. So let me order those films, and we're going to have you go ahead and get that. And then I'm going to read those films, and I'm going to decide, what, this is looking like a fracture. I need to bring in an orthopedic surgeon to give me a consult here, to give me some information. To me, I think we fit that role so beautifully. And also the same thing of, if we decided that somebody needed an injection, you see a bursitis or something, you want to hit that with, that seems like something that we should be able to do ultrasound imaging. We should be, all these things fall under this kind of gatekeeper or general practitioner of orthopedic injuries. But again, we have a ways to go for that. Legally, there's some hurdles for that. But you talk to our friends over in the military setting. That's kind of what they do now already. So, and they take just quote unquote run of the mill physical therapists who transfer over into the military, and they're like, yeah, just hang on my hip for a little while. You're going to learn when you are going to order a radiograph. You're going to learn when you're going to be able to, go ahead and recommend somebody take some anti-inflammatories for a short period. But again, when you watch in those settings, you see they are evaluating and then directing. They're not just collecting as many patients as possible and then seeing them to death, which is unfortunately what I see a lot in the general world.
Eric, just to interrupt you for a second there. Yeah. That might be a great place to get and build your end value for the actual practice of what the future looks like, because they have no pressure to see more patients. They're not incentivized like I am in the private sector too. But they do have the ability to order scans. I don't know about medications or anything like with anti-inflammatories, Medrol dose pack or whatever it is, but that might be a great place to get those numbers from and compare them against what's happening for the outcome data.
Yeah, I think there are people that are looking at that. There are a couple of military, a couple of researchers in the military that do look at some of those things. But again, that's not a setting that I'm in myself, but I do know that there's probably some culture things that are probably shifting within their setting too, of being even more of a, quote unquote gatekeeper. I do think that we underutilize the PTA. I think we almost hold our assistants down. When you think of a physician assistant, what all can a physician assistant do? Well, they can evaluate, they can put together a treatment plan. They can, as long as it's pretty straightforward and they're operating under the orders of their attending physician, I should be able to train a physical therapy assistant to under my, mentorship and everything that I've hired them. I train them up. And if a patient comes in status post ACL, I should be able to have my PTA do the assessment to say, this looks like a normal run of the mill, perfectly, no problems, no complications, post-op ACL, or, ew, this looks funny, I'm going to go grab the PT. But that's something that we just leave that off because we keep trying to, and then again, we talked about dry needling before as a thing of we're always trying to maintain market share and get as much market share as possible. It's like, no, if we could just really define our lane, man, we could do something special.
I agree. And Daniel, can you hear the chiropractors yelling if we were allowed to do x-rays, right?
Yeah.
Not be happy.
Eric, where can we find you? People want to search you out. I mean, the 4 people that are going to listen to this podcast.
Right. Yeah. They can find me on, I'm definitely on Twitter and Instagram. That's pretty much the only 2 platforms. I'm not terribly active on Instagram by any means. My blog is probably the best, or my main website is probably the best way to find me, and the easiest spelling, because you don't have to spell my last name, is just thesciencept.com. So with the beginning, thesciencept.com. And that'll actually have links to my social media stuff. It'll also have my courses, my course schedule, online stuff versus in person. I'm finding the online stuff is, I just basically just set up a camera and record my weekend course and then post it online and then, refresh it every 2 years. But then also like that foundations course, all that, everything's there and can be found through that. So yeah. And then the podcast, which is also linked there as well. But any podcasts, service, just search for PT Inquest and we'll come up.
I believe 233 episodes. So there's a lot of content in your catalog there, a lot of things that can be learned on your drive to and from the clinic.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Awesome, Eric. Well, listen, hang on after we get off of here, but thank you for coming on. Personally, you've been just awesome for me to learn from passively in the podcast, doing household chores throughout the years and through all the way to opening the clinic and for our profession. So thanks for everything you do, man.
I appreciate that. That means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. And so we will sign off and we will see you guys next week. Thanks, guys.